right, so thanks for joining, everybody. We're back for episode 2. Dave's here with me again, my trusty producer. And just so everybody knows, he's the one doing everything behind the scenes, so I can't take any credit for any of the editing or any of these cool reels or videos that come out from the podcast. I'm just here to bring as much information as possible to the people that care to listen. So I wanted to start today with just something that I saw on social media, and maybe this is something that we can do in future episodes too, to kind of just break the ice, so to speak, in the podcasting community. Dave, I know you saw the podcast that I was on with the Strength Classroom a couple of weeks ago that just dropped. And one of the things that we started talking about initially was just like how this industry is so different for a lot of people in the way that they go about their business on social media and so on and so forth. And one of the things that I pointed out was that relating it back to Louie Simmons and Westside Barbell and how he was always available, how you could just call him and he would stop his workout and answer any questions that you had, or if you walked up to him at like a symposium or a seminar and asked him questions, he would answer anything for anybody, for any stranger. It didn't matter. And it didn't cost a dime. And I talked about how like there's some of these influencers out there now that one guy, I don't want to drop any names because I'm not sure the legality on all that stuff, but he's pretty popular in the training industry. And he got a message from a guy. I was listening to his podcast and it said, "Hey, I would love to come work out with you. What does that look like just for an hour?" And he's like, normally we would do this and that, blah, blah, blah. But my agent or my manager wants me to say that it's $10,000 to work out with me for an hour. And I'm like, who are you? Even if you were Arnold Schwarzenegger, that would still be a joke to me. I'm sorry, but like, if someone popped in and, was in my area, my neck of the woods, and they're like, "Hey man, I want to grab a workout," I'm going to be like, "Yeah, of course. Heck yeah, let's do it. Like, that's fun for me." But for a guy to say, I understand, like, you have to make money on your brand and all that kind of stuff. And these people are making plenty of money training people and having subscriptions and all that kind of stuff. But $10,000, that's asinine. Like, come on, dude. Like, just be realistic. At least, is that what you're charging somebody to get trained by you for an hour? Because $10,000 an hour is a little bit ridiculous. You're kind of minimizing the amount of people you can work with at $10,000 a freaking hour. Okay. So I don't know if you know who, and I don't feel bad about mentioning this guy's name because I'm not going to say anything bad, but who Andy Elliott is. He's like this car salesman guru on social media. And he just put up a post that came up in like the part of the feed where it's not people that you follow, but like it might be like activities or whatever. It said that he was at this training deal with Patrick David Bett, which I know who that is. Big time conservative guy. I think he's got a massive podcast, and he walked up to Patrick David Bett and he said, "Hey man, how can we get, in the room with you for just 10 minutes to ask you a couple of questions? What would that look like?" And with the stone cold face, he said $500,000. And I'm thinking to myself, like, that's mind blowing. Like, mind blowing that someone would charge you $500,000 for 10 minutes of their time. And the response that Andy Elliott made was, he said, "Damn it, like that's insane." And he wired him the money, pissed off. And then he said, "How could I trust that the information that someone was giving me was the correct information if I didn't pay for it?" So there's two sides to that street. I understand like paying somebody for their time is being like respectful, but I think giving is even more respectful. Being able to give someone information that can potentially help them. And you're talking about 10, 15, 20 minutes, and your time is like $500,000. Like, are you the second coming of Jesus? Like, I'm just so confused. And so that irked me because I think a lot of these people got to where they are through giving, and then they kind of just turn their back and say, "You know what? Like, my time's more valuable than that." Like, look, we're not asking, I'm not asking Arnold Schwarzenegger like what protein shakes he takes, right? Like, if I ask him a question, it's going to be a very specific question on building muscle or something, like whatever he did. It may not even be relevant. I'm just using that as an example. And I just think it's silly that people can't give a little bit of their time to make a difference in someone's life. Like it's just silly. That's my rant to start the podcast.
That's I think what the kids would say, a yap session, or sesh. I don't know. Yeah, we just did some light research here on Patrick Bet David. Sold his company PHP Agency to Integrity Marketing Group in 2022 for over $300 million. So Justin, that might be why I think you said he's asking or for about, what is it, $500,000 for a retainer to have a speaking engagement or something like that. Yeah. So, I mean, as far as like jumping off what you said, I think the whole reason of this podcast is to give more than we get. As we said in the first podcast, we're not out here to be millionaires, but we are out here to help people. If there's one message I can really drive home from what Justin said is, if you're not helping people, get off the microphone. If you're not helping people, stop yapping and spending hours on hours taking people's money that feel very helpless and just want to give money away because they feel like the only way they're going to get good advice is if they pay for it. I think that is an idiotic statement that you said Andy Elliott said. Yeah, I think he's a moron too, and I hope he hears this.
Like I'm sorry, but if a person that I understand, like if it's somebody that you don't trust, and like there's so much to unpack there that drives me absolutely nuts. The first part is like, well, you've already paid to go to the training, right? So right. I'm imagining they probably paid $500,000 to go to a Patrick Bet David training symposium or whatever, right? So you're going to then say, well, if you want to get in the room alone with me for 10 minutes or 20 minutes and ask some questions as it pertains to whatever, right? Like it's going to be another $500,000. It's like, is the economy really that bad? Like, I don't.
It's not bad for Patrick Bet David. I'll tell you that much. No. Yeah, I mean, definitely would like to end that on the note of, we're here to help. Justin's here to provide you with some good, solid knowledge. And if someone's listening that's not a client, we're here to help you. And we want you to send questions to us. Just a reminder, you can follow us online at, well, we could do Common Athlete still. We also have Justin's page, which is just his first name dot his last name dot coaching. And then myself, I'm just Coach Dave Chase. I'll probably change that to Producer Dave or something a little bit more friendly, because I would say the only coach that I am, besides a few clients that I do have, is my 7-month-old son. And I would say he's the worst client I have, because he doesn't really listen to anything I tell him to do, but we love him, and we love him very much. We love Theo. Maybe he'll listen to this later in life. But yeah, wanted to, this podcast episode is, as always, sponsored by Common Athlete Performance Coaching. We did just create a YouTube channel, which this episode and our first episode will be on there. It is the Conjugate Dad Podcast. You can find us on there at youtube.com/@the Conjugate Dad Podcast. If you don't know how to spell that, you can Google it. I'm sure we'll pop up. So this episode is all about programming. We wanted to start with programming because that is the number one thing that I'm sure Justin gets from me, but other clients as well. Why are you programming this? How did you program? Why do we change things, et cetera, et cetera? So with the first question, I really wanted to just ask Justin baseline question when we did kind of talk about this in the beginning of the first episode, but how did you learn how to program what you're currently programming in 2025?
I would say that a big percentage of how I write program is driven from my peers and people that I've looked up to in the training and the fitness world. But the biggest impact, I would say, with this kind of system that I use is always going to be driven by personal experience. So putting in the blood, sweat, and tears in the iron business, right? Doing the training sessions, trying different things, trial and error, making mistakes, all of those things to this day impact how I write training program. Because if I've experimented on myself, and even when I first started putting programming stuff together, like for the girls weightlifting team or whatever, all of that stuff was trial and error. And it always comes down to not necessarily finding what's like the worst and what's the best, but like what's going to be optimal for somebody and like what's suboptimal for them. And if it's suboptimal, we're just going to get rid of it.
Sweet. So really just going off of what you said. So really just baseline anecdotal experience. I mean, who was the first person you ever programmed for? Was it like a friend of yours? Was it that high school team? Was it yourself?
Well, me, I always,
Yep.
when I started working with my coach way back in the day, my trainer John Davis, I always wrote down everything that I felt like was impactful or important in all this. I wrote down all the sessions, but then I really would star out in a book like this worked really really well, this thing didn't work really really well, so on and so forth. And so that's kind of like where that started, just kind of jotting things down and seeing the writing on the wall. And then from there, I would say yes, like with the girls, that was the first time that we actually went to the whiteboard or got in the book and like wrote out like how we're going to do this. But by that time, I had a really strong understanding, or a decently strong understanding, of the system, of the conjugate system, and how to bring up weaknesses, and the max effort method and the dynamic effort method and the repeated effort method and all that kind of stuff. And still, even then, it was just very baseline compared to what I know now. But that was like the beginning stages of how we can implement this in a, we'll call it a sports performance, environment. From there, obviously learning more. As I moved into like the sheriff's department, I continued to do all my own stuff, write my own programming, had a couple people that I worked with that I did some stuff with, but it was just very free one-off stuff. Continued to learn. I didn't really get into the books heavily until I was in Texas, and I was like heavily entrenched in that industry, to where like, okay, I'm giving people advice on a daily basis now at 5-Star Total Nutrition. Like, I need to have a better understanding of everything, and that's outside of the system that I like to use. So I need to understand, even though I may agree or disagree with it, I need to understand linear periodization. I need to understand block periodization. I need to understand conjugated periodization at a higher level, concurrent periodization. And then from there, like all the different splits that you can use, whether it's full body, upper, lower, push, pull, body parts, high intensity. There's a lot that goes into how you would draft someone's program, and that stuff takes a lot of time to really understand. But again, I think that the overall of learning this stuff is that you have to implement it for yourself first, right? So that you can believe in it, you can see that it works, and then you implement it, and you get rid of things that don't really work really well for you, but you don't completely get rid of them from your mind, because they might work well for other people. And then from there, the practice of writing programs for other people, and the more you do it, the better you get at it. I truly believe that program writing is a science in itself. So there's all of the biophysical kinesiology type of things that you can learn when it comes to the body, and like how you recruit motor units, and the what myofibrils are, and what the sarcoplasm is, and all these different sciencey things. That's cool and great that people know that on a high level, and I understand that stuff. But if you know how to actually write the program and have it make sense for what a person's needs are and what goes into that, you're going to have what I believe is a science, right? Some people don't think program writing by itself is that big of a deal. In fact, if you go and get a kinesiology degree, or if you go get, Dave, what is the other like fitness bachelor's degree that you can get? I can't think
Sports
of it.
nutrition or something.
It's somewhere along the lines of like maybe biochem is up there too, or something like that, in that category. But kinesiology is the one that comes to my mind. So
Like a BS in nutrition and health. Is that what you're talking about?
sure. So
Yeah.
my understanding is they only spend about a day talking of a whole 4 years. They spend about a day's worth of time on just writing program, right? That's crazy to me. Like how is probably the most important thing to getting somebody results in the gym is going to be based on the program itself, and like all the percentages and all the different styles of periodization that you can use, and all the ways that you can train, and all the different methods you can use. How are we only spending a day on that in university setting, teaching people that? It's got to be more than that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's exercise science. I just
There you go.
science, but
Exercise
yeah,
science. Okay.
yeah. I just put that in the chat. So if anyone sees me like just like always writing Justin's notes, it's just giving him an
Yeah.
idea of
So
what he was saying.
you've got kinesiology, you've got exercise science, and then like on a super sciencey level, you've got biochem. Right.
Right.
So again, that was just not coming to me in the moment. But I don't. I have two bachelors, but my bachelor's is in general studies and criminal justice. Because when you're an athlete, that's what you do. So like I didn't come to the realization that I was going to get into this world. It was always just a hobby for me until after I moved on from the sheriff's department. So for me, getting in the books, um, was super impactful later on when it came to program writing, because it just allows you to learn so much more, see so much more of the writing on the wall. Books like Science and Practice of Strength Training and The Book of Methods by Louie Simmons and Super Training. Those books, I mean, you could read those books and get everything you need to write good programming that's very unbiased, and you would be good to go. But those aren't books that you can just pick up with no experience. Like you have to spend some time in the trenches understanding like different things, because everybody starts off like, and it's all very linear, right? Every like 3 sets of 10, 3 sets of 12, 4 sets of 8, and then I come back to the top and I'm just trying to do more reps or add weight. That's very linear, but I truly believe like life isn't linear. The body's not linear. It's always adapting. And so, that I'll get into that later on as far
Sure.
as, how I use a different style of programming and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, definitely. Just you made a note, and I just wrote this to you in the chat. But for our listeners, you said like criminal justice is kind of what athletes do. I always used to hear like, they would study like sandbox or like something like very low level. I'm certainly not knocking this major. I was a humanities degree. I have a media comm degree from a state school. But Travis Hunter was given like very high academic honors. And my friend actually sent me that he was like one of the first to like be like a Heisman Trophy winner and very, great, job in academics. He has an anthropology degree. I'm not going to say that that's not an important degree. I'm going to say it's certainly not quantum physics. How about that? But we'll leave it at that. Hopefully Travis isn't listening in Duval County.
Criminal justice was like the underwater basket weaving of degrees.
Sure, there you go. Yeah,
right. So
well, that's the same as the North Carolina. I don't know if you knew about this. Roy Williams, when he was the basketball coach there, they had like a fake African American studies class that they ran for like several years, and people were taking the course and doing very well. It just didn't exist.
Yeah.
So hopefully the Tar Heels don't come after us on that.
It was when you selected, although I will say that admittedly, I probably had my mind made up in just doing that because I felt like it was the most sensible thing for me to stay eligible for football, to keep a decent GPA so I could stay eligible. And in my experience at SEMO, everybody that goes to play college football on scholarship thinks that they have what it takes to make it to the league or whatever. So I was very hard-headed in that, like, that was where I was going, so this really doesn't matter type of situation. And so I ended up taking so much summer school to stay eligible, and I was on campus anyways because of summer training, that I got all of these extra credit hours for all these classes that were like, easy classes. And I remember going to meet with my my advisor into my senior year, and they're like, you're gonna walk in December. And I'm like, and I was like, okay. They're like, you're gonna get 2 degrees, 2 bachelors. And I'm like, this is cool. Like that was when I finally noticed. And, of course I continued to piss off when it came to going to class and all that kind of stuff, because all I cared about was performing well my senior year. But I did end up graduating with 2 degrees and a 2.4 GPA, nothing to scoff at, but there was no application there for me. Like I didn't apply myself in criminal justice in any type of way. And I wish I would have. I wish if I could do it again, I would get a different degree that has more relevance, because nowadays people see a degree as like it's everything. And the reality is it's all a degree does is show that you have some sort of commitment to a higher level of education and to whatever you decide your craft is.
Sure. And I do think as far as, having like a media comm degree, I mean, you talked about like some like easy classes. Like one class I had was cinematography. We watched a movie in class every single week, and we just would talk about it. And then the other, it was a hybrid. And then the other part of the curriculum was you would watch a movie and then search for different themes, or known as motifs, and just talk about that. And there was really no research involved. It was always just arguing what you believed, and this is what I saw, and this is why I saw it, or this is how I saw it, rather. And it was one of the best classes I ever saw, because it makes you appreciate all the things that go into something, like all the things that go, like you said this at the beginning of the episode, and it kind of ties back to our whole topic. Like, I appreciate programming so much more now than 3+ years ago when we started, because when we started, it was my lower back hurts when I deadlift. I think I was engaged at the time. I'm not sure. When did we start, Justin? 21?
October-ish of 21, yeah.
Yeah, so I had just gotten engaged in April of 21, the very end of April. I was in retail, so I was always stuck in hotel rooms doing travel and stuff like that. So I was not putting my best foot forward when it came to programming for myself, just kind of doing stuff that I wanted to do. Never really like researched things other than just like bodybuilding.com, like free research with who was that guy, Jim? Oh man, I can't remember his name.
Jim Wendler?
No, he's bald and he has a really low voice. He's tatted up. He does like full body training now.
Are you talking about like the 531 stuff?
Yes.
Because that's Jim Wendler. If you're talking about, he created 531.
It's the Pro Gym.
Jim Stepani.
Jim Stepani was the
Yeah.
first, one of the first guys. And then Chris Gethin, 12-week trainer, was the first thing I ever did. We can go back to that later. But I wanted to wrap that up with, it's a lot harder to get progress when you don't have somebody when you don't understand it. You don't really understand it. So you said like it is a science. It absolutely is a science, but it also is so much more rewarding when you understand it. Like, oh, I know, we were just talking about this before we hit record. Like, why am I doing max reps for these 2 sets for these 2 weeks? And then you switch it. And you and I are talking about this off air. Oh, now I get it. Like, that's so much, now it's cooler to me. Like, it was already cool, but it's so much more interesting that I can now speak to it and understand it. I mean, you can read a textbook on the solar system, but if you just don't understand how far apart they are or anything about the solar system, how can you really enjoy what you're reading? So
Yeah.
I kind of want to close there, but the as far as like that first question, but the next question I have for you, Justin, is like, what type of programming starts at the beginning of your relationship with a client, and then what does that look like 12 to 24 months later? Of course, if they're assuming that they're still with you, like myself, I think we're on month 45 or something like that.
I think you have to have. That's a very it's a very good question, but there's a lot that has to go into what specifically am I going to use for somebody's their programming. In a lot of situations, we need to have some considerations that kind of fall into those categories. So like, what are their goals? What's their experience level? What type of equipment do they have? What's their time commitment? How fast do you want results? What's their training age? So this is a big one. So like, if I take on somebody like you that's got a 15 or 20-year training age, it's going to be a lot different than someone that's never touched weights before or didn't play sports or whatever. Then like, what's their overall age? That's going to determine how fast they can get results, injury history, and then obviously their lifestyle. So really the first thing I'll look at is like, when it comes to, and this is where a lot of people will really go wrong, is when it comes to creating a structure of periodization or programming for somebody, you need to kind of really take into consideration their stress levels, right? So if I take on somebody, like, let's just use you as an example at the beginning, like, regional manager with a lot of stores under your belt, it's still kind of new to you, having that many stores and handling that many employees, right? That's a lot of stress. You're on your feet all the time. So you're incurring a ton of stress, and you're younger, so it's not as big of a deal for somebody that's like 40 or 50. But as a 31, 32 year old, the amount of stress that you take in, that you endure, has a huge impact on like how much I can give you with programming. Because if I said, okay, I know you're on your feet from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. in the store, ruffling feathers, running sales, slinging supplements all day, right? Let's start with a body part split where you're in the gym 7 days a week for 2 hours just to make sure you're getting the prerequisite amount of volume in order for you to gain muscle, right? So when you look at that, does that make a lot of sense? It doesn't, right? Ultimately, you're doing is by week 2 you're going to be pouring from an empty cup at that point. Like your recovery is going to be gone because you're just constantly taking in stress, but you're not doing anything to get rid of stress, right? So we have to look at just that one aspect alone. I named 8 other aspects of things that we need to take in consideration, but the stress aspect is important. And I don't mean to make it as though stress is like the end game and it's ruining everybody's life. Well, stress is what's killing us all, but the more we can control the stressors, the better off we are. So I don't want you doing a body part split when you're working 80 hours a week and then trying to spend 2 hours in the gym when you've got all these things going on. Realistically, 60 minutes is plenty of time for you to get enough using an upper lower split, and then adding in some conditioning days as like buffer in between days so that you can recover appropriately, but also be able to tolerate stress better. When I break that down, I'm first going to look at what's this person's amount of stress that they have, what kind of job do they have kids, so on and so forth. What are all their responsibilities? And most people are pretty good at telling me like, hey, I only have, you know, 45 minutes every other day to train. Can we get it done? Absolutely. Right. So at that point, I'm going to look at all of those factors and I'm going to say, let's start just decently vanilla. The first week, I'm probably going to have them do depending on their level, their experience level, I'm probably going to have them do some form of assessment that I send for them. And then they shoot me some videos and I can just kind of see how they move. And that allows me to kind of select exercises based on what their weak points are. Because even if somebody wants to lose weight or wants to gain muscle or whatever, strength is always going to be an aspect that has to be considered, right? So I always want to take weak points into consideration, because if we don't, that could end up with them getting injured later on, and it will hinder the process of them getting stronger, which when you get stronger, you can gain more muscle, you can train harder, you tolerate stress better, so you tolerate illnesses better, so on and so forth. So from there, once I've kind of put all that together, it's typically either going to fall into, like, again, it's still pretty vanilla, but an upper lower split depending on how much time they have, or I'll do an upper day, a lower day, and then a mixed day on Friday with conditioning in between for mainly zone 2 for recovery. Because most people, when you get their stress levels down and you add in the zone 2 work, they just start to kind of drop body fat, and it gets a lot easier for them to sustain longer bouts of exercise.
Yeah, and I will say, when we first started, I think I was walking a little bit with my now wife. But when we were dating, I think she liked to run quite a bit. I know she liked to run quite a bit. And then I said to her, I'm a big walker. I remember watching the NFL draft on my phone while walking one of our 2 dogs, and just because I felt like walking was so much better than running. And that's a whole different topic. But I noticed that when I walked more outside of my retail job, I felt so much better. And then when we started incorporating those zone 2 cardio workouts, which I have one today, I used to hate them, and now I get jacked up for them. I feel better the day after a zone 2 cardio day. I feel more primed when I ready to go do like a full body day tomorrow, because you have me on an upper lower full body with a conditioning on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday weights, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday conditioning. And the rucking is something that I just never thought I would do. And now, speaking from personal experience, of course, I love it. I think it's the best part of the day to get out toward the end of the workday. You can get out, get some sun, spend some time with either my son, my wife will join me sometimes if her work schedule allows, and then bring in one of our dogs. It's the absolute best part of the day. And I used to hate it, because why would you want to go outside when there's so many cool things to do inside? You can podcast,
Yeah.
you can play video games, you can spend time with your loved ones. Well, shit, you can do all that besides the video games, outside. You can spend time with your family outside, and you also can stay on this earth longer because you're working out and improving your heart. And then, yeah, I mean, the other part of that is like, what is the, you talked about the beginning. What does it look like 12 to 24 months later? Like, I mean, okay, you just started with me in 2021. Now it's 2025. What does that look like for the people that don't obviously know me very well?
As you get more experience under your belt within a system, and as you get stronger, you get more advanced, you have to then start to train differently, so to speak. And when I say differently, you have to switch things for more variation, because the lack of variation for a lot of people, especially the general population, like, you're just going to create overuse injuries, right? If we're constantly doing 5x5s on deadlift or squats for somebody that's 42 years old, it's just not going to work out good for them, right? The whole point of this deal is so that they feel better. It's giving back to their body and not necessarily taking away. So if people are walking around wrecked 24/7, it's just not serving them the purpose of feeling better, even though there is, an aesthetic benefit to training, right? And a lot of people want that aesthetic benefit. Ultimately, you want to feel good, you want to have energy, you want to feel strong, all these different things. And if you're beat up all the time from lack of variation or no variation, you're going to get overuse injuries. So we have to change things, right? So maybe initially, I will allow somebody that's new to stay on something that's more vanilla with just a little bit of undulation in the reps. And when I say undulation, that just means kind of taking things up and taking things down. So almost like a wave. Okay. But as they get more advanced, like in your situation, we'll go through phases where the maximum effort exercise, the main compound movement in every exercise or every training session is going to change. It's going to rotate. Okay. Because as you get more advanced, you tend to need more variation because the body just gets so used to adapting to the things that you've constantly done to it over the years. And so because of the system that I use, where it's a semi-constant variation, people are able to stay with me for as long as I've been in business now. I have a good group of people that have been with me the whole time, and they continuously are able to get results. They're continuously hitting PRs. And so again, like, when you look at it from that perspective, as you advance, again, you are going to have to change some things, right? So 12 months in, there's a good grouping of exercises that we're able to double down on, but there's just so much variation. It's really never ending. So we're not constantly just deadlifting from the floor, or just overhead pressing or squatting. There's so many different ways to create adaptation that as you become more advanced, then you can go from, strictly full body, where it's like every day is full body, into an upper lower split, where we can go heavier using the maximal effort method. We can stay in that 80% range with like the sub maximal effort, and even up to like 90% with like brief maximal tension, and then using repeated effort to bring up weak points and create hypertrophy and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of different things, but again, as you get more advanced, there has to be more, in my opinion, there has to be more variation within the training program.
Right. No, for sure. And then you kind of answered my next question, which was like, how often are you switching that style of training? So you already answered that, but also, like, are there reasons that you would change a style of training? And the reason I asked this question is, even though I am CPPS certified, because you told me to get CPPS certified, shout out Joe DeFranco and Smitty Diesel. But the other thing is, like, I can do it, but I have my wife doing it, and she had a baby, of course, 7 months ago. So is there a different style of training for someone that is coming off of giving birth, so postpartum, post-surgery, injury, travel, just fell off? I mean, like, how often are you switching that? And then why would you switch it for a typical client who's been riding with you, and then they say, you know what, I am now 6 months pregnant, and 3 months I'm about to pop this baby out?
Yeah, so ultimately everything is still going to fall under that dome or that banner of, concurrent style of programming. So it's always going to start that way. But then I have to take, again, the considerations of what that person's just endured, what they're coming off of, whether they had a kid or they took some time off, or or whatever, you have to take all those things into consideration. So do I want to take a pregnant woman or a woman that just gave birth, so a new mom, right, that just went through all this lower trauma, right, pelvic trauma, diastasis recti, all these different things, like, do I want to take them and throw them right into an upper lower split with max effort and dynamic effort? Like, no, that's it's not going to make sense for them there. So what we'll do, and just to use your wife as an example, it's gonna, let's just work on building their GPP up, right? Their general physical preparedness to be able to sustain more. And as the weeks go by, and they could do a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more until they get back to where they're feeling like they're 100% to give into their program. That's the same for somebody that if they say like, hey, my job stress is just so high right now, I'm finding it hard to get to the gym more than 3 days a week. That automatically sets off an alarm for me that I need to kind of bring things back into more of, not necessarily like high volume, but just a moderate intensity, moderate volume, just so they're not overstressing their central nervous system. And it's almost like, again, I'm taking them back into a GPP phase, but I'm still using the same principles that drive a concurrent periodization, which is, we have a day that we focus on strength, and we have a day that we focus on conditioning to bring about more adaptation, but also more recovery too.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. Thanks for kind of going more into that. The next one is really, I think we even talked about this like in the last episode, but I know as a kid, I always logged stuff from when I was in high school. I think I started in like 2007 or 2008, like either sophomore year or junior year. A lot of people say football. I was actually like working out with the track team first, and then I was winter track, and then I went into high school football for the last 2 years after playing football for most of my youth time. And I always logged it. I just logged it all the time because I saw other guys doing it, and I thought it was badass to just write down what you did, because then you just like, you feel like a superhero when you write it down. You're like, oh wow, I did 135, and most times that's going to be 245s, right, on the bar, or one on each side, and then plus the 45-pound bar. So I always felt like a beast being able to like, oh, I could do 135. And then of course it would become, what did I do last week, right? So kind of gets me to this question of, why is it important for clients to log their workouts for their coach, in this case being you?
I just continue to quote Louie Simmons because like he's the godfather of strength and conditioning. But if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? So if you don't know or remember what you did last week, very few people have the ability to remember things or have the bandwidth to be able to remember things on a high level in terms of like sets and reps and all that kind of stuff. As old school as I am, like, and I, even though I have all of these different apps that I use for my clients and stuff, like I'm still writing out all my stuff in a notebook so that I can go back. And then I also film everything that I do, not only for content creation, but for me to be able to go back and say, maybe I didn't set a PR, but did I move that weight significantly faster than I did previously?
I had a question on that. You're logging. Are you videoing your warm ups, or are you videoing accessories as well as your main movement and supplemental?
I don't video the warm ups. I will just video. Well, that depends. If I'm doing something that's like very dynamic with my warm up, say like a med ball throw or a box jump, I'll film that.
Yeah. No, I meant like
But
your kettlebell warm up that you have for me, or not just me, but I meant like, oh yeah, I'm going to film myself doing my world's greatest stretch. Like, you're not going to that extent.
no, I will
But you
just
are recording accessories.
correct. Yeah, I'll record
Okay.
accessories.
Okay.
And I will record the main movement, all that kind of stuff. Because to me, like, if I need to go back 2 years, because again, like I think every 12 weeks you need to do some form of kind of assessment on where you are from a strength perspective. So like, you'll see for you specifically, like, some really good indicator movements for kind of where we're at without actually testing the actual movement that we're trying to enhance. So like with bench press, we don't have to test the bench press to know that you're making progress. We can use the close grip bench press to say, okay, if he got this many reps on close grip, it's it's typically going to mean that he saw an increase in his traditional bench press. Or another one for you is the floor press. Same for me. If my floor press goes up, or my close grip goes up, or my two board goes up, then my bench is going up, right? And then we could also use sub-max effort or brief maximal tension to determine if the bench press is going up without actually testing the 1 rep max on the movement. We very rarely will ever do that, especially with my Gen Pops. I'm going to use more rep maxes to get an idea of where they're at, so that I can continue to push them and progress them. So that's just one of those things where you have to have a method in place to be able to tell where someone is able to kind of like progress and so on and so forth.
So basically, just to sum that up, you're saying if you have a camera, record it. If you have the means, record it and send it to your coach. If you have a logbook or an app, record it there, because then you can look at the data and assess.
Everything with my clients is getting logged in the app.
Sure.
So if you come along and we come back to something you haven't done in 8 months, the app is going to trigger if you set a personal best in reps or weights or whatever, sets or volume or whatever. That way, then I can say, okay, well, he just did this. It's after we kind of recoup and adapt to that and super compensate, we can come back and then, improve in other areas because this has come up. So
Right.
we're constantly like, if I hammer, you can only hammer so many things like hard at once. We can cover all the bases, but we have to focus in on certain things. So like if someone's struggling with the way that the back of their arms looks, then we're going to hammer some tricep work for a while. And then the triceps kind of start to catch up. But then we kind of didn't hammer. We just maintained like upper back or whatever, which we're always doing upper back regardless. But we'll work to then bring that up. So like there's always something to chase, right? There's never going to be like this thing where all things are equal and you're good. The body doesn't work that way. So we're always working to like, I bring this up and then I maintain it, and then I bring this up and then I maintain it, and then I bring this up. And all of a sudden, like you're up here now, but you're still chasing. Like it's always going to be a chase.
Now, also on logging your workouts and recording your stuff, I'm going to look right at the camera when I say this. So ready? We're going to do a clip here. Don't log in to social media when you are doing a workout. Open your training app, log your workouts, use the timer for rest, and don't text and go on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram or X or whatever cesspool of social media idiots are on there while you are working out. The reason is you need to stay focused. Okay, I'm done. I just wanted to make sure that is very much hammered. When you are doing your workout, I open my phone. As much as I would love to look at pictures of my son on there throughout the workout, the only things that should be open, in my opinion, is Spotify, which you can play from a speaker or you can play from your phone to your headphones or out in the open air. I just got rid of my television in my garage because I was putting on the Pat McAfee show. I love that show. I have now listened to it on my rucks or when I'm driving to pick up and drop off my son at daycare. The reason being is I was sitting there, I would hear the timer go off, and I would still be sitting down. Be very intentional and be focused. The next topic, sorry, Justin, I just want to make sure we hammered that home.
I think that's super important. Like,
yeah.
What ends up happening is to kind of bring that to a head. If you do get on social media, and we've all been in this situation where if I have 3 minutes rest here, I'm just going to scroll real quick and see if I have any DMs or comments or notifications or whatever. And I will typically do that with text messages because I try to be 24/7 for everybody. And 3 minutes turns into 6, and then 6 minutes turns into 10. And that like defeats the purpose depending on the rest interval that I give somebody, which is extremely important. The rest intervals are there for a reason. I literally just had somebody message me yesterday and said, of all this time, I finally just started using your rest intervals. And man, it is so much harder when I started using the rest intervals. It's like, those are there for a reason. But Dave, the funny thing is a lot of these guys don't even put and gals that are coaches, they don't even put rest intervals in their programming. If you open up your paid for subscription on whatever app you're using, that's $15 a month, and they don't have rest intervals put in there, cancel it. because rest intervals matter a lot. Certain things need more rest, certain things need less rest. Done.
Well, yeah, exactly. And then just to even jump off of that, when you say like in the app, use max rest. I was reading it yesterday. Use max rest before your last two doubles on box squat. Okay, I know what you mean when you say max rest. I know on a box squat, I can still do what I need to do at about 180 seconds of rest or less. I would say 120 to 180 seconds is what you'd want me to do. But at the end of the day, it goes back to what we said in the beginning. You need to ask questions. You need to understand the why. You need to text your coach at the beginning of the week. So if the program is already in there on Sunday, you need to send a text message to your strength coach and say, hey, on Wednesday, I see here that you want me to do max rest. I'm going to write a note. What does max rest mean? You mean 6 minutes? Okay, cool. I'm going to do 6 minutes. You shouldn't be looking at your training app the minute before you go into the workout, because if I work out at 5 a.m., I can't expect you to be awake at that time. And I know the factors. You have 3 children and you have to take care of yourself. I don't want to be up messaging you during my workout when I should be working out.
You have to have like conversations with people. Like all this stuff requires conversations, right? So ultimately, like if I expect, I can't expect somebody to perform at a high level, a max set of 5 on box squats, and expect that they're going to only rest 45 seconds from their last set and perform or even get 5 reps the next set. So you have to rest more because it is a globally taxing movement, right? Now, tricep extensions, single joint movements, right? Like those don't need as much rest. So you can kind of push those because you have to in order to create that adaptation, in order to create strain and get close to failure and all that kind of stuff. So the rest matters.
Yeah. Then the other thing I was going to say, just a quick note, is like, are you still using Prilpin's chart, and are you going over RPE with any of your clients? So rate of perceived exertion, which I believe when we first started, by the way, just to give a note, I don't think anyone ever used RPE like that term in front of me ever. Like they were like, hey, how hard was that, man? And I said, pretty hard. I had no idea to quantify it. This is the pain scale, right? There's some great literature on this, like of you can say that, you know, this woman, I think it was in a short story, she said, I'm in great pain, but they just didn't believe her, right? And of course, it's historical fiction. You know, she could be at a 9 and you could believe it's a 2. We can never define that. And your RPE 6 could be my RPE 10 because we're just different people, and everyone on this planet is different.
That's incredibly important for women because, and I may have mentioned this on the last podcast when I was talking about the girls, but they can get 5 reps at 95% of their 1 rep max and then go up to their 1 rep max, or just go up 5 pounds and still only get 1 rep and then be able to get their 1 rep max at 1 rep. So women tend to not have that threshold when they look at, and that has to do with a lot of the times with, you know, whether someone's more fast twitch or slow twitch, for example, right? So like there's this example of like how many, if you can do less than 5 reps with 85% of your 1 rep max on any given exercise, you're more fast twitch. You don't have that higher conditioned capacity within your muscle fibers, versus if you can get 6 to 8 reps at 85%, you're more slow twitch. So you can sustain that effort longer. Because it's all about, lifting is all about time, right? So like I how fast do I get from point A to point B, right? So it's like the 225 bench max. A lot of these guys, they can probably do 10 to 15 more reps than what they're showing there, but either their muscle is just so twitchy and twitched up that, or they're just not in good enough shape in order to fully execute the amount of strength that they have in a conditioned manner, if that makes sense. When I worked with John Davis, one of the things that we used to talk about was like why being conditioned to be able to run was important. So like if you take the 40-yard dash, for example, and you can sprint, 30 yards at full capacity, but then you're not in enough shape to sustain that final 10 yards, you're not going to run as fast as you could have if you were in enough shape to be able to run that full sprint at the maximum capacity that you're able to actually sprint. So that kind of brings everything back to like understanding the percentages where people are at. And you mentioned like RPE. I kind of moved from RPE, which is rate of perceived exertion, into RIR, which Matt Wenning was kind of talking about that a lot. And that's where I got that from, which just stands for reps in reserve. And then I kind of found that it could be even more simplistic than that. So then I said, and this kind of goes back to what you said. Well, it was kind of hard, or it was extremely hard, right? So Dave, I want your dumbbell bench press today, your last 3 sets, I want them to feel like a 7 out of 10 difficulty. That's probably a lot easier for you to, compute in your brain. Like, okay, this needs to feel like 7 out of 10. What that ends up meaning is 3 reps in reserve or a 7 RPE. But the way that I explained it, I brought it down to a level that may be easier for you to understand. And then from there, because I know and you know that sometimes people aren't able to kind of push themselves by themselves, then I just started saying, okay, week 1, let's do 7 out of 10. And then week 2, I see the weight that you used. And I say, okay, I want you to use your top set weight from last week, this week, for your first set, and I want you to do max reps. Okay. Now I know that you're going to go to failure because I simply said those 2 words, max reps. Okay. And then from there, I want you to add 5 pounds and I want you to do max reps on that. I don't even care how many reps you actually get. All I care about is that you're straining close to failure. Now I'll say max reps -1, max reps -2. So then I said, okay, max reps might start to create some problems for some people in their mind in terms of like, I just need to go to failure all the time. So then that's when I started using that scale of let's do max reps -3. Okay. So you're getting to the point where it's starting to kind of be a grind, and you know in your brain, because you've done this exercise already, how many reps you probably have left in the tank, right? Which is kind of like saying reps in reserve. But if I put those max reps out there, it automatically holds like the connotation that I'm gonna have to go really hard here. But then I put -2, -1, -3, -4. Then it's like, okay, I'm going really hard, but I'm gonna stop before I fail. That makes sense?
Yeah, no, for sure. I always mute myself because I'm always derping around here. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that it goes back to having the great relationship with your coach, whether it's yourself, myself. I mean, we obviously want people to be driven to become an athlete, but I think that the bigger issue is if you're not having these conversations and understanding the why with your coach, I think you
Or
hit
with
it perfect.
yourself.
Or yourself. Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of like, oh, like I want to do max reps here, and then you do 15 and go, I'm tired. Right. I mean, we have to auto regulate. We have to know, hey, I just worked a 12, 14-hour shift. And let's say you're a welder. That's an extremely difficult job on the body. So if you only got 15 and you know that if you were rested on a Saturday morning and you get to sleep in and you don't have kids, yeah, you probably get 20, 25 if you're feeling really good. But auto regulate and say that was the max reps that you could do today. And you're honest with yourself when you do those 12 to 15 reps and go, you know what, I am tired. And I really did go all out as best as I could today on Thursday, May 8th, 2025, versus I'm only going to do 15. Screw this. I'm not doing one more after that because I hate doing this. If you hate doing it, then don't do it. I mean, there has to be something fun. You have to get something out of it because you can get the best results in the world and look amazing and get your dream body or get your ideal goal on the scale. But if you hate the process, then just don't do it. You have to love the process.
That's a great point. That kind of speaks as to why like standard linear stuff in my mind really just doesn't work that great, especially for the general population, right? Which is mostly what we're talking about here. Sally Joe goes to work and has a terribly stressful day. People are screaming at her. She's got all these tasks to do. And then she has to show up and do 3 sets of 10 with 135. 135 for 12 was a grind last week. But today I have to do 3 sets of 10 with 135. And guess what? I get 3 sets of 8, or 1 set of 8, 1 set of 6, 1 set of 5. Now I feel like a failure because I didn't auto regulate to where I needed to be for that day. I wasn't realistic with myself. And this do not take this as an out. This is not an out to not train hard. But the foundation of the max effort method and that essentially 90% and up training is that you're going to put in the max amount of effort for where you are for that day. It's not always about hitting PRs. Now, if you do things right, like you'll hit PRs, every week, right? On a different movement and with different variation or a different rep scheme or whatever, because there's the variation in there that you need that takes into account all the stressors that you are being exposed to in your life. So that's why that baseline vanilla linear periodization just doesn't really work for the general population, because there's just so many different things going on in people's lives where they don't understand what auto-regulation means. Hey, my back hurts today. Should I deadlift? It's like, maybe we do RDLs. Maybe we switch to the trap bar. And I built relationships with people for them to feel open with asking me if they can change something because they're not feeling it right. Like, I just talked to somebody a couple hours ago about how cable pull-throughs, they weren't feeling their hamstrings, they were feeling their back. And so, hey, let me see a video. Okay, form looks decent, probably just isn't the best exercise for the way that you're built or whatever. Let's try doing something else, right? It's not, that's why you hire a coach, right? But ultimately, like, if you follow some vanilla linear periodization through an app, that you're paying $15 a month for, and it's not personalized at all, that's what you have to look forward to. There's just not going to be any auto regulation that occurs there. And again, like, that's why these methods work so well, like repeated effort method and max effort method and dynamic effort method. It's that stuff is set in stone, but what's not set in stone is the variation and all the different things that are going into what we do. And then when we change things and when we deload and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I was just pulling up Pilpern's chart here, and I think it's funny when people do, just for an example, like I think, Justin, I'm probably somewhere close to like 400 bench press, like 405 maybe, which is certainly like nothing to sniff at. I mean, that's not even close to where you are.
So tell people, like, when we started, where you were. Like 300 for two?
250. Yeah. I think well, I don't know about that. I would say we're probably in the 265 because I never did a lot of barbell bench because I was always benching this way.
Yeah.
Yeah, benching this way versus down here and actually squeezing the bar. I mean, the very small things like bending the bar and really squeezing your lats and using your glutes and pressing down into the floor with your heels, those things were never explained in high school. In college, I didn't have anyone that did that. And then, of course, by 2017, 2018, I was just really doing it. I mean, I was doing it by myself for 10 years before I ever asked you for help. And I think my first message to you was like, I'm tired of seeing you get stronger and me not get stronger. And let's do this. But I mean, for example, like, just to go back to it, if I bench 400, I'm just going to take a number here. I'm looking at Pilpern's chart, 55 to 65% sets and reps. And I'm going to put this in the show so people can see it. 3 to 6 sets and reps. Optimal is 24. Total range, 18 to 30. What do I always see online from people that I follow on Instagram? And I really like some of these people. But this whole, like, I'm going to do 135 for 12 on squat or bench, and then I'm going to do 55 or 185, let's just say we're going to go plate 25 or 45. 135 for 12. Then we're going to do 10 at 185. Then I'm going to do 8 at 225. What fucking year is this? Why are we doing that? Now we've already hit 12, 10, and 8. So what is that? Is that 30 reps? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've already done 30 reps. I haven't even started my working sets yet. So now I want to do probably somewhere in the 80 to 85% range, which is optimal 18 reps. So I already did 30 reps, which is 6 over the optimal. Now I want to do 18 is my optimal reps. But people are going to do 6, 4, 2, and just go down. Why are you not trying to hit sets of threes? Like, a triple is my favorite. Unequivocally, my favorite rep range for a set is a triple. It is over and over and over again. And then a 4 or a 5. If you're not doing a 5x5 on your set, then it's either not the right amount of weight. And the reason I say that is when I'm warming up, I'm doing 1 to 2 reps at 135. I'm doing 1 to 2 reps, well, bar first, 135, 225, then 315 as far as like squats, right?
Yeah.
Why would I want to do more than 1 rep? I just want my body to understand, hey, like we're going for this. My CNS needs to get prepped. But why would you do 10 to 12 reps of 135 when you're going to do 455 at the very end of your work? Why would you do that? I just don't understand it.
So I think what you have to understand is like the three ways. There's three ways that we stimulate the muscle, right? Now this range, you'll find different ranges online, right? But first thing you see is mechanical tension. Okay, that's going to be anywhere from 3 to, we'll call it 8, 7, 6, whatever. 3 to 8 reps. That's where there's enough load to create strain, and you aren't breaking down a lot of muscle fiber to create a ton of hypertrophy. So, but you are recruiting a ton of high threshold motor units, which then is going to almost like increase the size of the myofibrils within the muscle fiber, right? That's more, I call that like functional hypertrophy, in that the muscle fiber is more, it's going to get stronger and be able to adapt to the forces that's placed on it a lot easier. Versus when you get up into like, let's call it 8 to 15, that's like where your hypertrophy muscle damage occurs. That's where most people try to kind of stay at. And think of that as more just like your standard rep range. But again, that's going to be somewhat functional, not as high as far as strength goes on the scale for mechanical tension, but it's higher in terms of like breaking down lean muscle tissue. But again, you may be hitting the appropriate volumes there, but are you hitting the appropriate tension in order to create adaptation within the muscle? That's where people get screwed up. I did a set of 15. Yeah, but 15 was like this. So like you're not creating that tension. So what you're describing through these warm-ups, even though people think that they're adding volume in there, which is great, but the reality is there's no tension involved. So it's really just what the kids are calling junk volume now, right? So then the next area, the third area where you can create adaptation is the metabolic fluid buildup, what they call like sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, which is like 15 to 30 reps. And that's more of like your bodybuilding style pump reps. And what that's doing is it's increasing the amount of sarcoplasmic fluid within the actual muscle fiber. So the fluid that surrounds the actual fibers that we're trying to actually grow, that expands the pump, the blood, the metabolic buildup, right? So it almost gives you like this false sense of something good is happening there. And it's okay. Like there's a place for that, right? Specifically for me, you're enhancing joint and ligament hypertrophy. That's the high reps is how you grow your joints and your ligaments. You get them stronger with low reps, obviously. But so again, if you don't have like, if you're not using mechanical tension or muscle damage, and then you're only doing that sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, you're not growing your muscle. You're just adding fluid in there, and you're ballooning something, and then it's just going to shrink if you don't do it enough, right? Versus if I establish a good amount of volume within mechanical tension, which is what you were referring to, and then using accessories to create hypertrophy and muscle damage, and then using metabolic buildup, sarcoplasmic hypertrophy in order to enhance the integrity of your joints and ligaments. And that blood flow, all that stuff is good for recovery too. So when you see that 200 reps on band tricep extensions at the end of your workout, we know why that is. It's going to enhance how fast I recover, because all that healthy blood is getting into the joints, the ligaments, and the tissue to enhance recovery. So that's why we would do something like that. But I feel like you have to understand, and most people don't, where you've got to put the correct amount of volume in the correct places in order to get that full spectrum type of result. And again, like if we're using Prelipin's chart, right, you have the optimal reps, and then you have the total rep range, and then the amount of reps per set that kind of help you dictate where you need to be with the weight that you're using. And if, again, going back to logging, if you don't know, then you're just kind of like going through the motions, which is what, unfortunately, what most people do. And most people don't get results because they are going through the motions.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for like explaining that. I mean, I just had to get that off my chest because I do love some of these people, but it's hard to see. And then they're like, they have this false sense of like, oh, I'm getting like results. Like, you're not getting results. Like you may look better. I think that ties back to nutrition. You may be able to have a little bit better endurance. I think that ties back to what you said, right? Mechanical tension, right? You're not doing the damaging that's actually like building muscle.
Or
90%.
strength.
Yeah, like you're not getting stronger. Like you're getting leaner, and that's awesome. And you're getting more endurance, and that's awesome. And by the way, these people aren't doing fucking 200 reps on band triceps. Like
Yeah.
I'm doing that because it's in my
Yeah.
program, and I'm doing it when I am told to do it. But you're going 90%, and it's like, oh, I got 2 reps. Good, like that's awesome, right?
Yeah.
That's not a failure. I don't know who told you that 2 reps at 90% is bad. That's actually great. Like, good for you. Like, that's a good thing.
It's
We're
just,
celebrating the wrong thing that you did 12 at 135, and we're not celebrating the fact that you did 2 sets of 2 on box squat or bench press, and it was a very heavy amount, and you got it. That means that you're doing the right things.
it's all about, it all boils down to like, what are that person's needs? And
Sure.
I don't have anybody that I really work with that's like a bodybuilder or a figure competitor or anything like that. Everybody that I have, that I work with, they're just trying to enhance their life in all different areas. So lose body fat, gain muscle, get stronger, feel better,
Yep.
sleep better, just generally have a better life. So your point kind of reminded me of like, there's going to be people that listen to this that are like, these guys, all they're worried about is just like lifting as much weight as possible. And like, how is that relatable to women? And I will throw out there that we know for a fact now with a lot of research that's coming out is women, especially 35 and up, need to train heavier in order to continue to gain muscle, because as you get older, your estrogen will start to decline, and that's your main anabolic hormone. Well, if you're losing a lot of that stimulus and that signaling to be able to create more anabolism, which is gaining lean muscle tissue, you have to find another pathway in order to do that, right? So you can eat all the protein that you want, but if you're not creating adaptation in the muscle to break down lean muscle tissue, you're not going to gain any more muscle. So that rep range now needs to stay somewhere in that 3 to 6 to 8 reps in order to establish your ability to continue to signal anabolism within the muscle cell, right? So the other part of this is that no, are most of my people really ever going for 1 rep maxes? No. Most of my girls are not doing that unless they want to know, and then we can make that fit. But the broad spectrum part of the time is we're using 3s and 5s and 6s and 8s and 7s and 9s and utilizing like rep maxes or 2 reps in reserve or something like that on their compound movement to establish strength, functional strength. Now, if you're like, well, this person's main goal is like, Justin, I just want to gain muscle and lose body fat. Cool. If your bench goes up, can you dumbbell press more? Yes. If your row goes up, can you lat pull down more? Yes. If you can do, it's funny because everybody wants to lose weight and gain muscle, but like 4 weeks in, hey, I really want to be able to do a pull up. So you do want to get stronger.
Yeah.
I would really like to be able to do 10 push-ups. So you do want to get stronger, right?
Sure.
So like if you know that and you understand what mechanical tension actually means and you understand what muscle damage actually means to you, then you know that the stronger you get over time, you're able to gain more lean muscle tissue. The stronger you are, the heavier you're able to go, the more likely it is that you're going to recruit more of those higher threshold motor units, right? Henneman's size principle states that we're going to recruit motor units from the slowest or the smallest to the biggest and the fastest based on what you do. So if you're doing a bunch of just junk reps, all you're going to recruit is a bunch of junk motor units. And if you're doing the heavy stuff, then you're going to recruit more of the lean muscle fibers. So that's why I have my girls training to get stronger at the beginning of their workout. You always do the compound movement first that takes the most energy, and then you work your way into the accessories and supplemental movements. That's just the way that it goes.
Right.
You wouldn't want to do the opposite of that. Like I'm
Right.
not going to do leg curls and then leg press and then glute ham raises and then abs and then
But I
tricep.
like it. But I like it.
And maybe there is a
I
place
like
like
it, Justin.
Matt Winning has winning warm-ups, but again, those are like 20% of your max, right? So
Sure.
it's just blood.
Context matters is
Yeah,
what I'm
context.
taking away from that.
Yes, it
Yeah.
matters, right? But I'm not going to train all those things heavy and then expect that I'm going to get a new PR for 5 reps and create this massive amount of tension and recruit all of these high threshold motor units on a box squat after I've done all of that work. It just doesn't make any sense. So you have to be able to go through and plan things properly and appropriately.
Elwood Henneman. What a name.
Yeah.
Wood. You think they call him Wood? I call him Woody probably. Anyway, the last question. I mean, I had a couple questions going off of that, but what is the worst thing a client can do when it comes to workouts?
Not communicate.
All right, there we go. That's pretty easy stuff. I thought you were going to say like, just not logging their workouts, too much chatter, no videos. That
falls
kind of
under
goes back to communication.
Falls under communication. All of everything you could possibly even say, well, what about this? Falls under communication, right? Well,
Yeah.
what about like the one thing that people will tend to say is like, well, wouldn't it be like they're not training hard enough? Like they're just kind of going through the motions? Communication, right?
Yeah.
They got to understand that in the notes, if it says, and again, this all falls back to extreme ownership and leadership, right? Like if I put the proper things in the notes and I create the expectation that if there's confusion, that they are to directly call me or text me to my phone, then there should be no issue with training intensity or
Right.
anything like that because communication works, right?
Right.
So that's why, subscriptions are cool if they have people in there that are like following up with you and answering questions and all that kind of stuff. That's cool. There's a minutia amount of people that are doing subscriptions right. Okay. And if I ever get into that space, I will be one of those people that does it the right way. But it's a time consuming deal for that person. And all these trainers, all nowadays, I've seen the ads. A lot of you guys don't see the ads because you don't follow these people, but the ads are, how can I get all of my time back and do a quarter of the work and make 3 times more money? It's like, do you give a fuck about anybody? And I understand that. Like everybody's trying to make money. I have bills to pay. I have scholarship money to put away for my kid. Well, all my kids are going to get scholarships, so I'm not worried about that. But in the event that they need that, right? Like it needs to be there. Like you have a new vehicle or a car, like you have to pay bills. I understand that, and I am not trying to downplay what I do, but at the same time, there's like right and wrong. And what's funny is I'll bring this up that Jason Brown, he has a YouTube series where he goes and he'll buy a free trial of X influencers workout program, and he'll just go through and just, if it's bad, like he'll poop all over it. Like there's no rest intervals. They're doing, it's 4 sets of 10 on everything. The compound movements coming after all this other volume. It just makes no sense. And he put himself out there to do that, which I think is cool. I don't have the platform to be able to do that, or else I probably would, because 99% of the subscriptions that are out there are just absolute garbage because they're just trying to make more money.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you kind of already explained what I was going to ask you, which is why should everyone else have someone tailor their workouts to them? You just said it. I mean, they're not tailoring it to their needs. It's cookie cutter programs. Hey, this is going to get you jacked in 12 weeks. Or you see these ads, like you said, you talked about, like, I think a lot of the big ads that I saw before I took a break from Instagram was like, or I think it was on TikTok when I was still on there before I deleted that app, which is another cesspool. Do you want to get jacked in 12? Give me 8 weeks and I'm going to get you super jacked. There's no context provided there. What is his definition of getting jacked? I mean, my definition, I'll just say, is I want to be the strongest I've ever been, and I want to be the most conditioned I've ever been. And then you went back to like the moms or just females in general that are training with you. Oh, so you want to get stronger? Yes, but what is your why? Let's go back to the why. My why, ever since Emily got pregnant, was I want to be the strongest, most fit person in not only her life, but my son's life. Because if he needs me to rescue him from a situation or just be his superhero. I know you had said that before, and I really just love that. So I'm going to keep using it. I want to be a superhero for him. I want to show him what it's like to be a strong example of a man and a parent and just a good human being. And I think it really does start with staying disciplined and being on a program that you can follow and ask questions and understand the why, because I'm hoping one day he starts asking me why. And I would love to have him as a client. And if not, I will stand by him every step of the way and spot him and do whatever he asks.
So I just kind of like when you made that comment about like get jacked in 8 weeks,
Sure.
right? Like,
Yep.
So again, context aside, I just asked, AI, but what is the fastest like an advanced person can expect to gain any amount of muscle tissue? And we're talking like a small amount of muscle tissue in X amount of time. It's really like 6 to 8 weeks just to gain a small amount of muscle tissue. So there's no one putting on sustainable muscle tissue. Yes, muscle glycogen stores can go up if you're somebody that uses the InBody, and it can register that as muscle, but sustained real tissue takes a minimum of 8 weeks to gain just a little bit. So to have someone say, I'll get you completely jacked in 8 weeks is just false advertising. That goes back to like when people do hypertrophy blocks for 6 weeks. Bro, you're not gaining any muscle like that in 6 weeks. So you're just wasting your time getting away from other things when you could be focusing on that all the time. That's why I prefer to work with people in 6 or 12-month splits or blocks, because it takes time to gain muscle. Even a beginner that's never touched a weight, it's 1 to 2 pounds of muscle in a 1 to 2 month period is what they can expect, right? So no one's getting super jacked in 8 weeks, and no one's gaining a ton of muscle in a 6-week block of hypertrophy. Just FYI.
Yeah, I mean, definitely like love that information. And I think it just goes back to like the whole type of the phrase that I always hear, like we used to hear this a lot in retail, right? I'm going to do my own research. Where are you doing this research? Because Google isn't your friend. It's really the enemy. And I think the reason I say that is if you're on Facebook or Instagram, TikTok, any of these websites, Twitter, X, you're not going to get peer-reviewed articles on anything. So that could go to anything with the pandemic. That could be vaccines. That could be supplements. That could be gaining muscle. And it's a slippery slope because these companies are legally allowed to spread misinformation. They cannot be held responsible for Justin and I saying, hey, you can drink 1,000 Sprite Zeros a day and not get cancer, even though, let's say that were to be true. Facebook is not responsible legally for posting that. However, you and I learned this from reading a book on misinformation recently, you and I would be held responsible. They're going to come after Justin. They're going to come after me and my family because we said it, even though we put it on their platform. And other countries have more regulations, but I'll say this. If you're going to do your own research, know what Pew Research is, know what NCIB is, know how to ask your coach, hey, what are some really good peer-reviewed articles? What are some good medical journals that you like to read? Even if it reinforces what you already think, and especially if it rebukes what you believe. So if you say hypertrophy is the only way to train, okay, that's fine. You should read something that proves otherwise. Hey, I'm never going to warm up. Okay, here's a review. Here's a peer-reviewed article on why you should warm up. So I just wanted to make sure, like, when people say the word, or if you hear it in your daily life as a listener, hey, I'm going to do my own research. Make sure that you're not just plugging something into Google. Make sure you're not just telling AI. AI is going to give you a baseline of what they have found from their servers. So like Gemini is Google's AI. That's just everything that it has, but it can't give you a definitive answer because there are subjective articles on the internet. The internet has information where I would say 70 to 80%, I'm just going to speculate, is fake information. Like this is misinformation, and it's completely legal for it to be out there. So I know that's a bit of a long-standing just a rant, but I just want to make sure, like, we're going to do research. We need to make sure we're on the right pages where people are being paid and given grants to do these research projects, and not just, hey, I'm going to write a blog because I like really want to talk about BCAs with no medical.
It's a slippery slope. It really is, unfortunately, because who paid for that research, right? If I'm being devil's advocate here, like, who paid for that research? So again, it all boils down to like, who do you trust? And that's the lowest hanging fruit, is like, if you trust somebody, then you know, based on their track record and the things that they have achieved, then you probably found somebody where they can help you, right? But ultimately, like, the way that you Google something matters. The questions that you ask AI matter. You can ask AI, hey, build me a conjugate template. And it will say, do max effort, switch the exercises, do dynamic effort every 3 weeks, switch the exercise, and use repeated effort to as your accessories, right? It's still very vanilla. But if you ask AI very specifically, create me a X routine for X result in this amount of time for this body type, so on and so forth. You really have to be very specific when asking AI. So it's not going to provide you a whole lot of personalization when it comes to what somebody actually needs and the results that they want to get. So again, it's a very gray area. And I have mentioned this many times, speaking with other people, speaking with you, that when it comes to social media, people tend to attach themselves to influencers that are like-minded or have a similar personality to theirs, right? But that, just because that person says that fasting is the right thing for you to do, for instance, we know now that, like, women that are over 35 shouldn't do fasted exercise. They should be eating before they train. And there's tons of information as to why they should do that. But that's different for men, right? So ultimately, the people, you shouldn't necessarily just trust the people that you gravitate towards because they have similar values to you. There still should be some type of expertise involved in what they're doing, but then they have a track record of results with what they're doing. And again, say they have a ton of before and afters, could be auto generated via AI. You never know. I will tag my people in my before and afters so that you know that they're a real freaking person, right? Like,
I can message them if I'm a prospective client and say, "Hey, Kat,
yeah,
these are some sweet results. Like, could you tell
yeah.
me more about Justin?"
So,
Yeah, here you go.
and again, for me, it's tough for a lot of women because they may not necessarily relate to the things that I post, on my personal account that I like to do. But I mean, again, that's not what it's about.
Right.
It's about, like, I wouldn't want to just take somebody on that I haven't spent some time interacting with. Like, I want to have some information about them too. And so again, you really have to figure out, the track record of these people. Like, there's a handful of people that I follow that, their word is the word. Ultimately, you mentioned people kind of like drawing the line on, like, this is the best thing. And what Louie has always said is that it's not, conjugate is not the way, it's a way, right? And when it comes to the whole entire inner workings of conjugate, it's just bits and pieces of other programs that are the best parts of their program put into one. So I'm not so prideful to say that there's not going to be some part of linear periodization built into conjugate with progressive overload. Duh. If you did 3 sets of 10 this week, next week you're going to do 3 sets of 12 with the same weight, or at least you're going to attempt to, right? That's linear periodization. No, I'm not doing that on compound movements, but yes, I'm going to use that on accessories. There's something built into that, whether it be wave loading, whether it be cluster sets, whether it be isometrics, whether it be the triphasic methods of eccentric, concentric. There's so many methods that can build into the conjugate system, and that's what makes it so great for the general population, is because you're able to use all of these different methods and put it into what that person needs based on their strengths and weaknesses, right? There's that there's elements of CrossFit in a lot of the conditioning, and we'll call them conditioning wads, or we'll call them metcons. There's elements there where I'll pull some elements from a wad that I see, but I'll make it make sense for the person. You know what I mean? Like, if we're using a barbell for conditioning, you're not doing it the right way, because barbells tend to raise your blood pressure. Zone 2 keeps everything steady. That's where we want to be if we want to recover properly. So I'm not doing barbell complexes for heavy weight the day after I do, max effort lower body, right? It just
Right.
has to make sense for the person.
Sure. Yeah. And I would say, like, just to touch on what you said, like, we've heard the phrase, like, birds of a feather flock together, right? So I just wrote this in our chat, me and Justin's chat. The homophily principle is often described as birds of a feather flock together, suggests that individuals tend to form connections with those who are similar to them in terms of characteristics like demographics, values, or interests. This principle has significant implications for social network structure, information flow, and the formation of social groups. And I learned that, Justin, I think close to like 10 years ago in school. So I will say that that media comm degree isn't completely useless, as I like to say. But, when you're not getting, like you said, like there's a few people that have the word, just because you agree with probably 90, 80, let's say 80% of what Jason Brown says. That doesn't mean it's 100. He could say something in a video or say something. I love Joe DeFranco too. And we've talked about this. I really do love Joe if he ever listens to this. But there's a few things that he's posted that I sent to you and I go, it just doesn't seem like he's aligned with former Joe. And you can adapt. That is 100% true. What you believe in 2002 does not need to be believed in 2022. But there has to be some level of consistency when you're critiquing someone, that no matter who it is, whether it's my wife or my enemy, they should be held to the same standard of, if it's something that you really want to call out and say, this is misinformation, this is a lie. We have to do that. At the end of the day, we really do have to hold
Yeah.
everyone accountable, and ourselves more than anyone.
Yeah, I have a very direct example. So I like Joe a lot too. And since the very beginning, I have followed him, and I was in, and I'm sure you're in it too, like their little group thing on Facebook for the people that got the CPPS certification. And they did a live one day with him and Smitty and a couple of these other guys that I didn't really know who they were, but apparently they were like really good functional trainers. And I just simply asked the question, like, because I was curious for myself. How likely do you think that it is that if you had a guy that was 40 years old with a 420 bench press and they wanted to get to 500, are they able to do that, and what would be some of the things that would be impactful? And then obviously I asked, like, yeah, I told him, I said, I understand all the different principles and all that kind of stuff. I'm just curious as to kind of, how would you kind of lay this thing out if you were to do it? The answer that I got was really kind of surprising. And I don't blame him, because his audience is now this functional over 40 audience that's more concerned with, you know, longevity and how they feel, which is great. Like, I support all of that stuff. I'm the same way. But if someone has a goal they're chasing, like, let's not write that goal off. And him and this other dude, Smitty didn't really say anything, but him and this other dude really went to, like, well, there's so many other ways that you could create adaptation in the body. Like, why would you want to use the bench press as like the be all end all? You could do something like, set a PR on push-ups, or set a mobility PR or flexibility PR. And I'm like, okay, so that has no relevance to the question that I asked. It was his way of beating around the bush and getting an answer out there without actually answering the question for me, which I feel like if I'm in that group, I have the right to ask that question. And again, I'm not knocking him for the way that he answered it, because I understand his niche that he's in now with, so he goes on to say, like, that's just going to cause more harm than good. You should focus on all these other things. It's like, okay, cool. That's not what I asked. I asked if you felt like it was possible. And I didn't say this, but in my mind, I'm like, I asked if you felt like it was possible to achieve, and what are some of the main things that you would do in order to get there, like outside of specifically like exercises. Are there different implements that you would prefer over others? I just wanted to get an outside opinion ultimately, right? Like, because I know most of this stuff, but I wanted his opinion because I look up to him. He's an expert, right? And him and then the functional guy just went on for 10 or 15 minutes about how there's so many other ways to create PRs and to continue to progress. And I'm going like, that's great. I understand that. Like, there's a million different ways to skin a cat, right? But I'm talking about this specific cat. Like, I'm sorry that you jacked your shoulders up and your back is all fucked up from all the different things that you did. But like, we're talking about me here. So like, I have decent shoulder health. My back's not messed up. Like, how can we and they just beat around the bush. And that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Again, different strokes for different folks. I still follow him. I still listen to his podcast, but it has gone away from, just being as strong as possible to more of like, functionality and flexibility and, just being lean and all that kind of stuff, which is cool.
No, yeah, for sure. I mean, you can definitely, like I said before, you can adapt, but it has to be, you still have to be able to call back on the knowledge that you have and back it up. Yeah, I mean, really wanted to make sure like we touched on the programming. I feel like we did. Was there anything else you wanted to add, Justin? I feel like, we've hit on pretty much everything I wanted to hit on.
We hit on, there's obviously this segment can be as many episodes as we want it to be. There's so much that goes into depth in terms of how we do, but that's just like kind of the basics of how we would start to set things up for people.
Mm-hmm.
And then, in the future, we can talk about rep schemes more. We can talk about the different methods specifically.
Right.
We can do an episode all on max effort method. We can do an episode all on repeated effort method. We will cover all of these things so that people kind of understand them on a higher level to be able to
still have implement. My CPPS workbook, by the way.
There you go. I still have all my stuff too.
Yeah, I'm looking through all my stuff. Yeah, this is some good stuff here.
I think, we didn't talk about like the hierarchy of foundational movement patterns and how that makes programming easier. Those are all things that we need to discuss in future episodes. Law of averages.
Yep.
What the realistic amount of sets and reps are for exercises. And, we touched on Prolopin's chart. Obviously, there's a lot more that goes into that. Luckily, I remembered to bring up like, the myofibrillar hypertrophy versus like sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. That kind of made sense with what we were talking about, but mostly like we probably need to go back and touch on like examples of different periodization that people can use and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. No, for sure. Yeah, definitely. And as always, follow us on social media. And I just want to close every episode with this, just on a personal note. Thank you, Justin. Above all, and this is something that Justin really hammered home on his side back in Kentucky with his wife's support. Emily, thank you so much for being incredibly supportive. I love you. You are my biggest supporter, even when I don't support myself. So really do appreciate that. And I'm going to keep this in the podcast and say it every episode because I am so thankful for you and everything that you do for me and Theo, and specifically like letting me do this podcast on my off.
Amen.
Sweet. Please join us next time on another episode of the Conjugate Dad Podcast, sponsored by Common Athlete Performance Coaching. We'll see you next time.
Rest intervals.
Use your rest intervals.